This is going to be a somewhat casual video. I'm just going to sit down and talk to you guys about something. Now, I find myself thinking about cameras a lot. Showering, playing with my kids, driving in the car. I've been thinking about the fact that we have basically every single lens that we'd ever need for Sony APS-C. And I thought about that more and more, and then I came to the realization that there's one very popular focal length among full-frame Sony users that is not available on Sony APS-C. And I'm talking about a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8. I wanted to make this video and discuss why and what an ideal APS-C equivalent would be, which would be roughly a 50 to 130 millimeter f2.8. So the first question is, why does this lens not yet exist? And I think I know the answer to this, but I'm just guessing. They probably don't think there will be a huge demand for it, or maybe it goes along the same lines of what maybe some people are thinking when they go out and try to buy a telephoto lens, and that is, I need the furthest reach possible. And so if you know you're buying a lens that's going to be big in the first place, you might as well go and get a full frame lens, because what difference does it make? I mean, if this 70 to 200 works just as well on an APS-C camera body, why not just buy this? And it saves the companies making these lenses that much more on R&D and marketing and trying to sell APS-C versions of these lenses. What are the benefits of having a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 equivalent for APS-C? Well, there are two very basic things. Number one is the size, and in a funny turn of events, I am reviewing this Sigma 70 to 200 millimeter for full frame this week. I'll have that video done shortly, but there is one complaint that I have about this lens for use on APS-C, and that is the size and the weight. In my video about why I shoot Sony APS-C, I showed a quickly thrown together graphic of the difference in size between APS-C and full frame, and what's important to understand is that glass is heavy. It takes a significantly larger and heavier piece of glass to cover a full frame sensor with an image than it takes to cover an APS-C sensor with an image. And when you have zoom lenses like this one with 24 elements in 22 groups, just multiply that out. And if the glass elements can be, let's say, 40% smaller and lighter, then you can multiply that out by 24, and you can imagine just how much more compact you can make a telephoto lens for APS-C. And I don't really care even if it extends out like this 16 to 55, just look at how compact this is to carry around and pack away with you. If this was the size of a telephoto lens, even if it was an inch or two longer than this, it would be significantly smaller than trying to carry around a massive full frame version of the exact same lens. The second benefit is obviously price. Because you're using less glass and less stuff material to put this thing together, it should come in a little bit less expensive as well. Now, if Sony is any indicator, their full frame lenses, for example, the 24 to 70 f2.8 G Master is $2,400 US. The equivalent, which is this 16 to 55 f2.8, is $1,400 or $1,300 depending on whether or not it's on sale. So almost 50% off. And when it comes to telephotos, it's the exact same story. The Sony version of this 70 to 200 comes in at almost $3,000. It's $2,800. And so an APS-C version, if Sony were to create it, would probably come in at $1,500 US. But third-party lenses are definitely in a different league when it comes to value. So for example, this Sigma is $1,500 US for full frame. Could you imagine if they came out with an APS-C version of this lens that's smaller, lighter, more compact for $800? And it doesn't even have to be Sony or Sigma. Even Tamron could come in and take this. Even Samyang could come in and do something like this, or Tokina. All of these companies have the ability to put together a high quality autofocusing zoom lens, yet for some reason, no one is doing it. And I think this is very strange, because a couple of years ago, let's say 3 to 4 years ago, it seemed like the only lenses that you could get for Sony APS-C were mid-range or typical zooms. So something from 16 millimeters out to 70, something like that. We had the 16 to 50 from Sigma. We have the 16 to 55. All of that was good. And at that time, I complained that we really didn't have an ultra-wide, solid autofocusing ultra-wide zoom or prime that was faster, f2.8 or better. And then all of a sudden we got a drop from Tamron, the 11 to 20. We got Sony dropped 3 ultra-wide lenses for APS-C on the same day. And then we have the Sigma version to accompany this one. So you have the 10 to 18 millimeter from Sigma f2.8. And so now you have the ultra wide end covered. You have kind of the mid typical range covered. But again, nothing on the telephoto side. No constant f2.8 specifically designed for APS-C lens exists that I'm aware of. That's designed for Sony mirrorless. That's modern. That's not 15 years old. And I get reminded of this almost on a daily basis from your guys' DMs on my Instagram, because people ask all the time, what's the best ultra wide angle lens? What's the best general multi-purpose one lens to cover everything? And I tell people, hey, ultra wide angle right now, really the Sigma 10 to 18 is the one to get. For an everyday lens to cover everything, it's one of these two, Sony 16 to 55, Sigma 18 to 50 f2.8 zooms. You really cannot go wrong with either one of these. They're just on two different budget levels. But when people ask about a telephoto, I don't have anything. I honestly, most of the time, recommend a full frame telephoto lens to use on your APS-C camera, because the APS-C versions, they're really not that great. Right now, what we have is the Sony 55 to 210, which is, I don't know, 15 years old. It's optically not brilliant. It's not built very well. It's cheap, but it's also a variable aperture. It's really not the best lens out there, especially because you have a smaller sensor. So for low light work, f6.3 is not very good at all. And then you also have the Sony 70 to 350 millimeter, which is also a variable aperture lens. Good lens, optically much better than the 55 to 210, but again, variable aperture, so as soon as you zoom in, it's like you're saying, let there be darkness, and there is darkness. And it's pretty big, and I also don't really need 300 millimeters or 350 millimeters. That's the equivalent of 525, if my math is right, on a full frame sensor, and that's really zoomed in. Do I really want to carry around that extra weight and the extra size? Not really, unless it was an f2.8. And in fact, I'd sacrifice the telephoto end of that lens in order to get a constant f2.8, which is the whole point of making this video. Again, that lens does not exist. So the question becomes, what would that ideal lens look like? And I know right now in the comment section, it's going crazy because people are inevitably going to say something to the effect of, well, you need to multiply everything down by the crop factor. So really what you need is a 50 to 130 f1.8 to get the equivalent bokeh and the equivalent depth of field. And I've answered this question so many times in past videos, and I've come to the point where I've just stopped answering it because I feel like people don't get it, or they don't want to get it, or they just don't want to drop the argument. And I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know if it's just people who own full frame censored cameras and full frame lenses, and they just think that their stuff is superior than everyone else's, or if they are trying to prove something to themselves or to other people. But I will say it one last time here, aperture, so f2.8, is a physical characteristic of the lens. So an f2.8 lens is an f2.8 lens, period. That's it. If you want to get into what that looks like and what the equivalent level of bokeh is at a certain focal length, then yes, you can do mathematical gymnastics and figure that out for yourself. But just because a shot has bokeh that looks different because of a crop factor doesn't mean that lens is letting in less than f2.8 worth of light for that sensor. If it did, then no one would ever use an f2.8 APS-C lens in crop mode on their full frame camera. And on the flip side, a full frame f2.8 lens, such as this Tamron 28 to 75 G2, does not automatically become an f1.8 once you mount it to an APS-C camera. It's not really how it works. So for my needs, f2.8 on APS-C is more than adequate. I never find myself wondering, this Sigma is pretty good, but if it was f2, it would be that much better. I don't really need that super shallow depth of field in 99.8% of my shots and my videos that I take of my family. And I think that we often forget there are people out there that simply want a good camera to use to take family photos. They want to take pictures of their travel, they want to make videos. Even I forget this at times. There are people who don't want or need the best, the biggest, the greatest. There's a level of simply good enough. And nowadays, when you hear the term good enough, it sounds negative, as if you are settling for a nickel after you couldn't find a dime. But there is such a thing as good enough. and it's a positive thing. Okay, let me rein it back in after that long tangent. I was answering what this ideal telephoto zoom lens would look like. So I don't really care who makes it. It could be Sigma, it could be Sony, it could be Tamron, it could be Rokinon, Viltrox. I don't even care if TT Artisan makes it, as long as they make it good. What I'm looking for is a telephoto lens, let's say 50 to 130 millimeters, f2.8 constant. And here's the kicker. I'd want it to have image stabilization or IS or vibration compensation, whatever the term is for it, because after using this lens just for a couple of days, this Sigma again, it has optical image stabilization built into it, and it makes such a huge difference. Now the one on this one, they say is like 7 stops of stabilization. I don't know if I believe that, but I do know that this works a whole lot better than just IBIS. And also if someone were to come out with a lens such as this one for APS-C with stabilization built in, that would open it up and make it more appealing to everyone out there who has an A6000, A6400, or let's say one of the 80% of APS-C cameras that don't have IBIS built in. Plus, optical stabilization simply works better at those super zoomed in telephoto focal lengths. So that is it, 50 to 130 f2.8 AF with IS. The thing is, Sigma had one of these lenses back in the day. It was the 50 to 150 f2.8 to EX-DC HSM. It was designed for APS-C, it had built-in stabilization, autofocus, internal focusing, and it was released back in 2007. And no one knows why it was killed. At least no one on the internet knows. But could you imagine that lens today, a modern version of it, so a 70 to 200 shrunk down into an APS-C form factor? It would be pretty amazing. It would be, I think, a very, very good seller. And so I ended up emailing Sigma, and I kind of laid out this video in an email form. And I said, hey, this would be awesome if something like this came about. And so we'll see if anything happens with that. I doubt that they take my suggestions and they start R&D right away, but maybe they already have something in the works. You never know. The other thing that happened just today is a friend of mine ran into me and he said, hey, what do you think about me buying 3 FX30s instead of 1 or 2 FX3s? He does music videos for some quasi-famous people and probably famous people as well. And so that was interesting again because it made me think about this video. It made me think about what he would use and what he would want. And he would probably buy a 70 to 200 equivalent for all 3 of those FX30s or at least 1 or 2 of them. And so I think that this would be a lens that, you know, if it came out, it would be something that appeals to not only the mother or the father that's out there recording their kid's soccer game or basketball or something like that with their APS-C camera, but it would also appeal to those who are using these beasts that we have, you know, the A6700, the FX30 that I'm using to record this video. And these are tools that we just have been missing. And so let me know what you guys think down in the comment section, because I might be alone on this one. Maybe this is just so far out of left field and no one would pick up a lens like that. But I honestly think that if a lens like this came out from, you know, Sigma, Tamron, whoever it is, and they priced it well, $800 or $900 for a constant f2.8 70 to 200 equivalent on APS-C, I'd pick it up just like that. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Is there something that I'm missing? Would there be another lens that would be even more important than something like this? Always curious and excited to read your guys' stuff. Let me know what you think of these kind of more casual videos, sit down talking. If you hate them, absolutely, then comment down below. If you like them, then let me know, because I may do more of them. Maybe not. We'll see. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for all of your comments, all of your likes, and your support. Stay tuned for more. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.